Okay, thank you very much for joining today. We're presenting the Trusted Sec webinar on unleashing the power of AppLocker with Oddvar Mo. This is a part two of a two-part series. Part one you can find on our website under events. Also, this will be recorded, so if you miss anything or would like to go back and rewatch for certain insights, that will be available to you. And if you could, ask any questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Once again, want to introduce Oddvar Mo on unleashing the power of AppLocker. Oddvar?
Thanks, Stephen. Welcome, everybody. So this is part two of the AppLocker series, as Stephen mentioned. So for you who just joined for the first time, I'd like to quickly just introduce myself. My name is Oddvar Mo. I work as a senior security consultant at Trusted Sec. And before starting working with security, I worked many years as a Microsoft infrastructure consultant, where I played or helped customers with implementing all sorts of Microsoft technology. And therefore, AppLocker became one of my favorite areas. So I have a lot of experience with that, and that's why I'm doing this webinar. I work as a pen tester slash red teamer. I also do some security research. I speak, do public speaking a lot. I also contribute to GitHub. I make blog posts. I tweet stuff. I try to contribute in as many ways as I can. Microsoft has also awarded me the MVP award for the fourth time in a row, since I contribute a lot in my expertise area. Cool. So in part one, we went through the basics. So we covered the setup, how we start out with AppLocker, how to implement the rule set, how to maintain it. So for those of you who haven't seen it, that's, as Stephen mentioned, on the website, so you can watch that later. Today, we're going to cover how we go beyond the basics. So the goal today is basically to give you insights on how to find weaknesses in AppLocker setups and how we can harden the setup even more. Of course, it's almost impossible to cover every scenario, so I will cover some of the most common ones and give you the general idea of how to proceed with this. So first off, how do we bypass AppLocker? So the first rule of thumb is that you need to figure out what sort of rules are in play when you are up against or trying to figure out how to bypass it. You need to figure out the rules. And by that, I mean you need either to see it in the group policy management console, or you need to find a way to as an attacker, figure out a way to extract the rules so you can view that somewhere else. I will cover that a little more in detail a little later. Once you figure out the rules, you could decide to either run a trusted assigned binary to execute code. Just to name drop a binary, MS Build, for instance, is a Microsoft assigned binary that you can use to execute C# code. And normally that file is in a whitelisted location if you use the default setup with AppLocker. If that's not the case, if all the normal LOL bins are blocked, you start to look for writable files that you as a normal user or the normal user has access to, or writable folders that resides in a whitelisted location. If you find that, you can either overwrite the file, or you can create a folder or create a new file and execute that way. And last but not least, if you're able to execute, you win. That's the basic flow of a bypass. So in terms of figuring out the rules, as a defender, normally you have access to the group policy management console, where you can look at the rules that are in play. We covered that fairly thorough in webinar part 1, so you can look there how to go into the group policies and look up the rules if you want. What I'm going to focus more on is how you do this as an attacker, because sometimes you land on a box, you get a shell, and you want to figure out what sort of AppLocker rules are in play. So AppLocker stores all the information on the client in registry, and it stores it as XML blobs under the HTML software policies Microsoft Windows SRPv2, and there's a section key for each section. So you have an XC section, DLL section, script section, and so on and so forth. Under each of these, the rules are in a value, so you can read out the different values. So I will show you how to extract that in a bit, so you can like take it offline and look at the rules without doing it actively on a client. In terms of finding weaknesses, there are some tools that I like to recommend. There's a tool from the SysInternals team at Microsoft called Access Check. And this tool or this binary can check for writable folders or files under a given path, and it can do recursively searches. So I have created a small batch script that I use very often for scanning the program files and program files x86, as well as the Windows folder, for folders of files that have that you have permissions to write to. So as you can see, there's a lot of different groups I'm scanning with. The first one is users, it's everyone, it's authenticated users, and so on and so forth. So there's pretty many different SIDs you need to scan for in order to like find everything on a system. So I'll go through that in the lab as well. There's also AaronLocker Digital has a free tool as well. It's a single binary that is, I think this tool is really good. So basically you go to that link there and you can register and you can download the binary to run it on a system. But of course, again, when when looking and trying to find weaknesses, there's this chicken and egg problem where you need to have a place to like place a binary in order to execute it. So this is normally how a defender would do it. So he would normally just either whitelist the binary you want to run, either the AaronLocker Digital or Access Check, or maybe create a folder on a host and whitelist that so you can run the tools and check. So the AaronLocker Digital looks like this. It's a GUI where the first thing it does is it asks you for what sort of system you are auditing. So in this case, I chose AppLocker. It also has for application control and for their own product as well. So you can use this to audit a lot of different things. It highlights the potentially insecure paths with red. As you can see, there's a couple ones here. I say potential because it assumes that they are possible paths you can run code in, or the user has bright access to. You can also see that it shows what sort of status AppLocker is in, like is the service running, is it group policy applied or not, what sort of sections are enabled, and so on and so forth. When you click next, you can also scan the hard drive. So what it basically does, you choose the folders you want to scan. In this case, I've scanned the entire disk, and you can see clearly in red where he was able to actually execute files. And what it does under the hood is that it places a file in each folder and tries to execute it. If it's executed, it will report back to the tool that it was successfully, and you will get it listed in this nice GUI here. So this is a really great tool if you are a defender and want to like figure out what sort of things what sort of unsecure folders I have on my system. There's also other tools. I created a PowerShell module called PowerAL. It's still a work in progress, so not everything works in this module yet, but there's a lot of good functions there, in my opinion. So there are native AppLocker commandlets, but I didn't like the output, so I started my own module. So for instance, if you run the get pal rules, it actually outputs them in a nice list instead of a big, huge XML blob. And I prefer that when I want to investigate the rules. There's also some other cool things that I've implemented, such as get PAL writable allowed paths. So what it basically does, it enumerates all the possible writable paths on the hard drive, and then it reports back which location are whitelisted in terms of those that are writable. So you get a list of like possible paths that you can actually execute code from or execute binaries from. You also have the get PAL rules, where you can like not only get a nice output, but you can also specify, like, for instance, I just want to get the exe rules and I want to get only the allow rules. Those are options you can add as inputs to that commandlet or function. So that way you can like be very narrow when you're looking into stuff. Let's see. There's also there's also a check for if PowerShell version 2 is installed or not. That's a pretty easy thing to figure out without the script. But if it is, it's easy to use as a bypass for most of the constrained language mode restrictions that AppLocker applies to PowerShell. So you can basically just stop PowerShell version 2 and you bypass constrained language mode. So that's an important thing to remove in terms of protecting Windows. So as soon as you apply AppLocker, it will apply constrained language mode on the endpoint, and that's a good thing. There's also the get PAL path status, where you can supply a path, and it will tell you if it would be allowed to run or not based on the rule set. Okay, so that's just a quick overview. I also maintain a sorry. I also maintain a list of scans I do every now and then. So in this list, it looks like this. I've gone through all the writable folders for an end user. This has now changed in the latest Windows 10 version. So this is not up to date, but it gives you an overview still on that there's a lot of folders you need to be aware of. I know that, for instance, the Windows tracing folder is still a valid place to add stuff. So a normal user is allowed to create subfolders. And when you create a subfolder, you automatically become the owner of that folder. So you can change the ACLs and allow stuff to execute from it. That also means you can upload files to that folder because you have all the rights. And if you have other systems installed, for instance, SCCM, it also has some folders that you need to be aware of as well. And a lot of other third-party tools also has like adds folders into Windows folder that you need to have a look at. That's why you need to run the access check to check it out to verify in your own system. And another typical thing I see in terms of bypasses is that people forget something called the alternate data streams. That's an NTFS thing. So normally when you create a deny rule, let's say you don't want binaries to execute from C Windows tasks, you create a deny rule that has where you say task/star. So that means AppLocker will look for something after the slash. But the problem is that when you use alternate data streams, you can basically just pipe a file into a stream on a folder. And that way you kind of bypass the slash. So you end up running a file from C Windows tasks : and the file you want to execute. I'll show you that in the lab pretty soon. So here's an abuse example that should work still. So in this example, I'm creating a folder under the tracing folder called YOLO. And then I do something called echo on the file I want to have into the stream. So I pipe it into C Windows tracing YOLO : file.exe. And then you have to do icackles on the folder because you need to have full rights. Basically, you only need execute rights, but still, since you're the owner, you can change the rights, and the default rights the user gets on that folder when you create it is not enough. So you need to do that. So yeah, that's kind of dumb, but that's how it works. And then when you granted enough permissions, you can use double mimic to call a process by using the parameters process called create, and then point it to the NTFS data stream. And it will magically execute the file from that folder. And if you look at the folder in the Explorer, it will not show that it increased in size because NTFS hides it in a stream. So in order to view it, you need special tools or use a special slash or an option to the dir command to list out these streams. I can't remember it from the top of my head, but I think it's /r or something. You can type dir / and you can see it. Right. In terms of running stuff and adding stuff to alternate data streams, I also maintain a list of different things you can use in Windows to add stuff and execute. So this is just a small output from that list. So you could use type, you could use extract32, certutil, also print.exe to actually take a file and put it into a stream. In terms of running stuff, there aren't that many options. So the most common one is double vimic, but you can also use run DLL32 for DLL files, and cscript for Visual Basic scripts, and so on and so forth. There's some options there. So this is a good thing to be aware of when you're trying to protect against evil stuff, and also good as an attacker to know about these possibilities. We also have signed binaries by Microsoft. That's a common problem with AppLocker because in the operating system, there's a lot of tools or binaries already built in that are signed by Microsoft that you can use to actually execute code. I mentioned MS Build, but you have, like, for instance, MS HDA as well, presentation host, regasm, regsvcs, install util, and so on. And this is just a little, this works for the default rules, but there's also a lot of other rules, other binaries that works depending on the configuration as well. Yeah, this is just an example taken from a page I maintain, where I can run MS Build and point to an XML file or a CS project file that contains C# code, and it will get executed. So as long as the AppLocker policy doesn't block MS Build, you can use this to actually execute code and do more evil stuff if you want to. In terms of, you know what, let me actually pull up the page real quick. Let's see, where do I have my, there we go. Exit presentation mode. So this is the list I'm talking about. I maintain this on GitHub. It's called the Ultimate AppLocker Bypass List. So I have created like different lists. We have something called generic AppLocker bypasses, and we have those verified that I showed you in the PowerPoint. There's also unverified ones and DLL execution bypasses. So unverified, these in many cases depends on configuration, but it also, I haven't verified every single one, but most of them will work. BG info, for instance, that's sysinternal tools. So it's something the user or the admin actively has to install. So if BG info is of an older version, you can use that binary to actually execute code. If you click on the different ones, it will show you examples. So this could be a really helpful page if you want to know more about these bypasses. Right. Yeah, and this is the complete list of the alternate data stream thing that I was mentioning. Yeah, I just quickly want to show you that. So let's jump back to the presentation. Yeah, so I also got a question last time if I could show a search spoofing attack. I could, but it's there are like different kinds of search spoofing attacks. So if you haven't installed these, if the machine you're attacking hasn't installed the CVE 2020-0601 patch, you could actually spoof a certificate and add that to a binary and get it to execute. But in I would say in many environments, this patch has been installed. So yeah, you could find proof of concept code just Googling for that CVE. So it shouldn't be that hard to, to figure that out. I'm not going to show that attack today. Another attack you could also do in terms of certs is that if you get your hands of a code signing cert, of course, that the system trusts, you can basically sign the binary using that cert. I never needed to do that because normally there's other bypasses that are more that works. So I never had the need to like create a code cert and get it installed and all that stuff. And normally if you already have that sort of permissions, you go way beyond AppLocker either way. So yeah, you could ask me questions about this later if you want. I'll be happy to answer, but I will not show anything related to cert spoofing today. Okay, let's go through a little lab I prepared. So let me get my client up here. So this is the machine we used the last time. So it has AppLocker rules applied. So what I was thinking is that we start by exporting the rules, so I can show you how to do that as an attacker and move them over to another machine. So let me first show you how they look in the registry, if I can learn how to type correctly. There we go. Yeah, so in the path, HTLM, software policies, Microsoft Windows SRP version 2, you can find the different sections here. So if I click, for instance, on the exe one, there are different folders here or keys where there are values. Inside these values is basically a chopped up XML output. So if you combine the value from each one of these, you end up with an XML file that is basically the rules that are applied to the host. So what I normally do, if I get the chance, I do, let me see, I don't want to mistype, so I'll use copy paste. I use reg export, and I point to the top folder or top key, SRP version 2, and then I choose an output, in this case just to the desktop, and run it. And then in order for me to view that somewhere else, I need to get it out from that host. So of course this is in my lab, so I'll just use copy paste. So let me do this and jump over to another machine. We'll pretend that this is a machine that we have full control of. And before we import it, we need to do some minor edits on it. There are, when you do this export, for some reason it applies like a line break that it shouldn't do. So if you import this into the registry, it doesn't work as it's supposed to be. So I'll just quickly remove the line breaks so it will work. Let me show you. Almost done. Just a few more. You could possibly, or you could of course automate this, so you don't have to do this every time, but when you're attacking a system, you have the time to do small edits, or you could do search replace or whatever. Okay, saving this, and then I'm just gonna double click it, import it, hopefully. Okay, come on. Not sure why the computer is hanging. There we go. So now it's been added to the registry on this host where we have full control. So if you were an attacker, this would typically be a VM on your host or in your own environment. And the next thing you can do is run a PowerShell command. You actually need to do this. Let's see, add to admin. I'll paste it and I'll explain it. So first I will output XML out of the get AppLocker policy. That's a native commandlet in Windows, the effective policy and XML, and then I will save it to the desktop as an XML file. This is a way to take the information from registry and actually do a proper export. So I don't have to manually go through the registry file and like combine it to a valid XML. I'll just run that real quick. And then I have a valid AppLocker export as if you would do it from the group policy management console. So here we have the rules. So if I want to view this, I can simply just do the local GP edit on this host. So I don't need Active Directory or anything. I can just do it on a Windows 10 host. I browse into security settings. Oh, come on. Why are you so slow today? Oh, man. Okay. Decided to hang a little. Let me just kill it and try again. Okay, so Windows, security settings. There we go. Application control policies. And then we go to the AppLocker one. And here you just right click, choose import policy. And then we point to the XML file we just created. So it's on the desktop, choose yes. And it says 16 rules were imported to the policy. And then I can, in the GUI, just browse around and look at the different rules that are active on the host we're attacking. So that's a neat way for me as an attacker to get the rules out of the environment and to another host where I can view it, so I can understand better what the rules are. Because it's easier to see it in this GUI than look at the XML files, in my opinion. Especially when you have like, I don't know, 50, 100 rules. It's almost impossible to browse the XML file. It's so much easier to use this GUI, in my opinion. Right. So let's jump back to PC2 again. This is the protected computer. So I have prepared some stuff here. So under the C Windows whitelisted folder, this is a whitelisted folder I created just to show you how to look for folder and file permissions. So here's the batch file I bragged about earlier. So normally you just start CMD and then you browse to the folder where you have the batch file, and then you just run it, and it goes through each one. It's going to take a while, so we'll just stop it because the Windows folder is going to take a few minutes. So I've saved the previous results so we can review them quickly. The most interesting part in this demo is the Windows folder. So you can clearly see that there are read and write access under the tracing folder, as well as the registration/CRM log. So this is these are valid locations where a normal user can actually create stuff. So let's try that real quick. Let's go into the Windows tracing folder. To verify. So if I right click, I can actually choose to create whatever I want. So I can create a folder under C Windows tracing. And this is default, and I'm not an admin. I'm a normal user on the system. So that's verified. I can actually create a folder under there, and it's whitelisted. So that's basically how you check. And you will discover, if you install a lot of different software, you will discover that, especially under the program files folder, you will sometimes end up finding folders or files where the user has write access to. And that's not a good thing in terms of AppLocker protection. So you need to either fix it or contact the vendor to get them to fix it. So I did that once for TeamViewer had an issue. So I reached out on Twitter to TeamViewer, and they fixed it within a couple of weeks. So that was pretty good. All right. So let's go through the PowerShell module I created. Let's see. Let's fire up PowerShell. So in order to run this, I need to start PowerShell in an unrestricted mode. So before I do that, I will show you real quick. I have prepared, I've downloaded a script already. This is taken from the PowerAL GitHub repo. The links are in the slides later, so you'll find it there, or you can just Google for PowerAL and my name, and you'll find it. So it's basically just a script with a lot of functions that I showed you in the slides. So for me to run it, I need to start PowerShell in an unrestricted mode, like this. That just means that I'm allowed to run scripts. And then just to show you how restricted I am, execution context, language mode. You can see that I'm in something called constrained language mode. And that means I cannot do stuff such as call the API. So I cannot do, for instance, system console write line hello. Things like this gets blocked in constrained language mode. So PowerAL has been written to work under constrained language mode, because that was one of my primary goals. I wanted it to be able to use it when I attacked the system that was protected by AppLocker. So as long as I could get PowerShell running and I could import my module, I could actually do all the actions I wanted to. That means that some of the some of the functions are quite noisy, especially the ones that checks for folder and file permissions, because it basically just goes into every folder, every file, and checks the rights. So it's kind of a noisy module, but I think it's pretty good. Okay, so let's just do this simple. Let's just edit this. I will just copy all the code. It's like 3,000 lines of code, so it's a lot. Just paste it in. It would be fun to do a webinar where I wrote all this code on the fly. Okay, and then we can start by doing one of the main functions, which is the get PAL writable allowed paths. So this is going to take a few seconds. It will basically just enumerate all folders on the system, and it will try to create a file under each folder. So when it's done, we will get a list of all writable paths as a user, where AppLocker has chosen to be whitelisted. So here we should probably see like the tracing folder. We should see, yeah, some of the ones we saw with access check, basically. Yeah, it's not super fast, but let's see. It should be faster than this though. Okay, there we go. Yeah, you can also do, there's built-in help for the different functions. So if you're familiar with PowerShell, you can use the get dash help space and then the commandlet you wanna read about, and then you can get like help and examples on how to run them. Going forward, I will update the GitHub repo with some more documentation. It's been a while since I actively worked on this module, but I have big plans on finishing in it and getting it to version 1. For now, it's like version 9.2 or something. Okay, almost done. I also created this in such a way that it doesn't need to rescan every time you run a different commandlet. So this is just one, it runs this one time, and it's stored in a global variable during the entire PowerShell session. You can force it to rerun, but as a design, I've chosen it to be global and use the already cached information. I think that's the best way. Okay. First, it just outputs everything it did, and then it will end up showing us the ones that are interesting, like right now. There we go. So here we are. Here we have the different folders where these are locations that are whitelisted. that the user has write access to some extent. So there you can see the new folder we created as well. So this will work for the DLLs, the exe, the scripts. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, let's do get PAL rule section status. So this will just show you if the different status of the different sections, if they're enforced or audit or not enabled. And in many cases, when I attack systems, I see that DLLs are not enforced. And that means you can basically just, as long as you can get a DLL on disk somewhere and do run DLL on it, it will execute because DLL protection is not enforced. That's something as a defender you want to turn on. Yeah, let's do get PAL rules. Let me show you the get help thing. So if you do like this, and we can do full, I have documented most of it, given some examples. So it should be fairly easy to use. Let's get some rules. Let's see, get PAL rules. So here you can choose like, I want all rules, only hash rules, or path rules, or publisher rules. You can also choose only allow rules or deny rules. That's pretty useful. We also have sections. So if I just want to have the exe rules, I can do like this, and it will give me all the exe rules. So if I want to show them in like a more pretty way, I can do like this, rules list. And then it outputs it in a more beautiful way, in my opinion. So these are the AppLocker rules on that host. You can also do stuff like you can do like get PAL path status, and you can supply a path, and it will show you if it would be allowed or denied. In this case, it would be denied in all sections. If I did Windows tracing, for instance, it would show me that DLLs are allowed to execute for application, exe files, MSI would not be allowed, and that's true, and scripts will be allowed. And also, if you supply a .exe, it understands that I'm checking only the exe section of the rules. So it doesn't output every section. It only outputs allow or deny. All right. So let's do. I talked about alternate data streams. So I quickly want to just show that to you guys. So I can do this from a CMD instead. So let me try and increase the font size a little, like this. Let me browse to ctemp. I have binary files laying around here that we can use as part of the attack. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do mkdir to create a directory under the tracing folder. Let's call it YOLO. And then I'm going to do type on the auto runs and pipe it to C Windows tracing YOLO colon auto runs exe. And then I need to do iCackles on the same location. Windows tracing YOLO. Grant normal user. Let's see, it's colon F, I think. No, it's like this. If I'm not mistaken, get my notes real quick so I don't. Yeah. So now I've given myself all the rights to that new folder. Then we can use vimic process call create to that binary file. And voila, it will execute. So now we have auto runs running from a kind of a special location. Let me show you in Task Manager really quick. under more details. Let's see if we can find it. There we go. So it's YOLO : order runs.exe. Kind of funny. All right. So that's the alternate data stream bypass. That's basically how that works. So you can basically pipe it to a writable folder, and then you can execute it from that location. And that works in the cases where they have blocked. If in this case, if they had like blocked YOLO /star, I could use this attack to bypass it. Yeah. Okay. Let us go into something called. Yeah, I'll do that later. After I first need to switch to the slides. Yeah. So what I suggest, if you're a defender, there are some block policies that I've written that you can use as an example. I strongly recommend that you don't download them and add them into production, because it will break stuff. I have added so many block rules in there, and probably a lot of them will break production. I've even added block rules for run DLL 32. To me, it serves like a documentation, basically. I can show you real quick. Let's see. This is it's the same repo as the ultimate AppLocker bypass list, but I have a subfolder called AppLocker block policies. And here I have created block policies for all sorts of stuff. So for instance, under the DLL section, there are rules that, for instance, block PowerShell, like system management automation.dll, because in many cases you don't want end users to be allowed to run PowerShell, for instance. It also has like a recipe on how to download these rules and add them to different GPOs. I really strongly encourage you, if you want to do this manually, to follow like this recipe where you add like one group policy for each section of block rules and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's it. If you are starting out with AppLocker, I would recommend that you look at something called AaronLocker. I will walk through this in the lab within the next minutes. But it's basically an automated framework from Aaron Margosis at Microsoft to basically just install. What you do is you install a computer from the ground up, install all the software that your company uses, and then you run this script on a host. So it scans the entire disk, creates the output you need to import it into an AppLocker policy. And it follows all the best practices for building up the rule sets. So this is really great stuff. I cannot recommend this enough. It's really good. So let me walk through that real quick. Well, not quick, but I'll walk through it. So on PC2, I need to go in as an admin first. Let's see. I just want to make sure that I log into the domain. Yeah, I'll ask questions. I see there's a couple of questions coming in. I'll take them in the end if that's fine. I just want to go through everything that I planned for, and then I can go through the questions. No problem. Okay, so I've already downloaded AaronLocker from the GitHub link I showed you in the slides. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start PowerShell. We need to start it unrestricted so we can run the scripts. And I'm also starting this as an admin. So I'm holding down Control-Shift and pressing OK, so that it opens the USC prompt. That way, AppLocker will block my admin user from running scripts. Okay, and then we'll just navigate to the right location. Desktop, AaronLocker, like this. So this is basically the files that are located here. It's a set of scripts. So what you normally do is that you can adjust stuff here. I recommend that if you're going down the road with AaronLocker, there's a good documentation on everything. It's a really well thought, well written documentation that you want to read before getting started. It's not a huge Bible, but it's a good documentation. And it goes through how if you want to customize something special, like for instance, let's say you have a special type of software that needs special care, you can add that into here as well. And also if there are new bypasses coming out, it's fairly easy to add them into the rules here. So what we're going to do, we're just going to basically create the policies. So let's just do, one note before I continue. It's important that before you do this, you download Access Check. It needs to be in the same folder. It needs to be under the AaronLocker folder where you have the scripts, because the create policies that scans the drive and creates the policies is reliant or needs the Access Check binary for it to scan the drive. Okay, so let me go back to PowerShell and let's do the create policies. Now it scans and it follows all the best practices. If it finds something in the user app data, it will create rules. First, it will try like the publisher rules. If it's not signed, it will create hash rules. And if that doesn't work, I can't remember if it creates a path rule or not, but I think it does. Yeah, so it's scanning right now. And when it's done, it will place the output in the outputs folder. It's almost done. There we go. So it creates two policies, one for audit. So if you just want to see how this would affect your clients. We covered this in webinar part 1, where we walked through how to create an audit policy and gather the events to a central server. And it also creates an enforce one. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to copy this and we're going to import it in a group policy on the domain controller. So I'm just copy pasting, copy, and then I'm moving over to my domain controller. I'm just gonna place it on the desktop. It's called AppLocker 2020. Yeah. Then we create a new group policy. Just call it temp. This is just to show you how to import it. And then we go into policies, Windows settings, security, and then the application control policies. Then you right click here and choose import. And then you browse to the file we just transferred. So that was the 12th, was that one? Open, yes, I'm sure. And it imported all the rules. So we now have 113 rules. And as you can see, it's a better rule set than the one I created with the default rules, because it has like exceptions for stuff, such as under the Windows folder, all files located in the Windows folder, but it has something called exceptions. So if we open this up and look at the exceptions, it has already blocked different paths that the user is allowed to write to. So it automates the entire process of what we were looking at earlier. So this is a good way to get started with AppLocker, in my opinion. It also does some other stuff. I think it removes, there's like a default rule for MSI files, all signed MSI files, and it changed this to just signed MSI files from Microsoft, and that's a good change in my opinion. It also adds like the sysvol shares, so you can run scripts from netlogon and so on and so forth. So yeah, it really takes a lot of stuff into consideration when it generates those rules. So yeah, it's good. I like it. Yeah. So to sum the webinar up, I recommend that you use AaronLocker to help you to build the best rules that you can. But of course, in addition to that, you need to pay attention because there are new bypasses coming out every now and then, especially on Twitter or on private Slack channels and such. So you need to pay attention. When I find a new one, I update the ultimate AppLocker bypass list. So that's the place I go when I find a new bypass that is published by someone. I also urge you to do your own scanning every now and then, just to check that you are kind of compliant in terms of all your software that you have on your endpoints, to see if there's something new introduced, especially if you upgrade versions and stuff. So there's like, for instance, when you upgrade Windows versions, Windows 10 to a newer version, sometimes it creates like a task-migrated folder, and this is user writable. So if you don't do the scanning every now and then, those things can be missed, and it will be a valid place for an attacker to place a binary and run code. It's also important for me to tell you that even though AppLocker is great, this is not like a set solution. It doesn't fix or solve security. It's not a silver bullet. It helps. It's a lot of work, of course, but it's not perfect. But I think it's really good. It really helps. It eliminates a lot of attacks, and when you implement this correctly, it will make the life for attackers much worse, and they need to invest more time and more money for their attacks to be successful. So I would strongly consider implementing this if you haven't. Yes. So that's basically the webinar. I included some sources, and I'm going to go over the question list and try to answer them as good as I can. All right, let's see. How can we protect against the launching through the alternate data streams? So if, let me go back to the DC and I'll show you real quick. So in the AaronLocker setup, it actually takes that into consideration. So if you look at the exceptions here, you can see that the driver's data has one exception for /*, but it also has an exception for :*. And this eliminates alternate data streams with that location. So that's how you specify blockage of alternate data streams. Let's see. Okay, hi, in the first webinar, I'm missing how to get subscription manager working. I hope, okay, so you're probably thinking of the event gathering, right? Let's see. So one problem I had last time was that I in the end, I said, oh, I had problems getting it to work. I'm not sure what happened. So I figured that out. So the problem last time was actually regional settings. So this is kind of stupid, but in Windows, when you collect event data, it states the language or regional setting it expects everywhere. So if you look here under the details, it says the culture should be EN US. On my system, this was set to Norwegian, so it couldn't display the details here. It only said it couldn't display details, something wrong. So the way I changed that was that I went into the control panel, went to, let's see, region, and then I set the format to English, United States, and the event data. I was able to view the event data afterwards. Was that an answer to your question, or was it something else you were thinking of, Derek? I'll give you some seconds to type. You could also turn off your mic or turn on your mic if you want, I think. No? Okay, while you're typing or not, I will continue on the next question. I'm trying to get AppLocker events to our CM with Windows Event Forwarding. Any insights on that? Yeah, there are some documentation on the Microsoft documentation web, I think. I haven't have a lot of experience integrating into CM solutions, but normally, I know if you have like Splunk, you use a forwarder on the endpoints, so it will send event data. So what you basically do is that you change the event forwarding setup to also include the AppLocker events as well. I know this can be different from the different CM providers, so I don't have like a set answer here. So maybe if you send an email or something, we can figure something out together. I can help you at least. Yeah. Any more questions? No? If not, then I think we'll, okay, here we go. How to get the log access in configuring log access. You indicate you should have a special type of string. How to get the log access. Oh, yeah. You're thinking of the write. That's documented on one of the Microsoft blogs I referenced in the previous webinar. But there's a command you can run on the host. I think it's wevUtil to list it out, and then you have to add something in addition for it to work. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see, Jessica, pane event forwarding. So let's see, Windows event forwarding. That's the video. I know she has a blog where it goes through basically how she did it. Maybe it's this. Oh, it's just a video. No, there we go. Waffles. Let's see. It should be down here somewhere. Let me see. Yeah, I can't find it right now. I'll have to shoot you an email, I think, but it's in one of these blog posts where she explains how that works behind the hood, basically, and what you need to set. So for me, I just copy pasted it once, and I've used it ever since, basically. Yeah. Happy birthday! Thank you, Sandra. Appreciate it. All right. So if I didn't answer your question, please reach out to the webinar email address, and I will get answers for you. Cool.
All right, Oddvar, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate your time, and have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.